Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Grief, the emotional shitstorm you never signed up for. My name is Margaret Dennis. I am a women's life empowerment and holistic grief coach and the owner and founder of EVOLV Coaching. And I spend my time working with women who've been through grief and trauma and helping them to heal and to figure out how to move forward after suffering some deep grief. Today, I am very honored to have a really good friend of mine, my business partner with Unshakable Me, and a creative in her own right, the owner of Rise and Sparkle Creatives, my lovely friend, Miss Lea Moffatt, will be joining us today. And our topic is going to be all around how we use art as an expression to help us work through our grief. And before we get started, well, first of all, welcome, Lea.
Thank you.
And before we get started, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about Lea because she's pretty awesome. So, Lea is someone whose story is as powerful as it is tender. Lea Moffatt is a mother, writer, and creative guide who has spent years navigating complex grief, particularly the invisible kind that often goes unseen and unnamed. She's the co-founder of Unshakable Me, a summer program that empowers teenage girls, and the author of several creative healing tools, including the recently launched coloring book, Hex the Fuck Out. Yes, I said it. I'm not sure if they'll let me say that on YouTube or they'll, I don't know. We'll see. Lea brings a fiercely honest perspective on grief, trauma, and caregiving, especially as a stepmother to two teens with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Her work is rooted in the belief that healing doesn't require perfection and that creativity can be a lifeline for those still in the thick of it. Lea's voice is one of radical permission, sacred rage, and quiet resilience. I am so honored to welcome my friend, Lea Moffatt, to the podcast today.
Thank
Welcome, Lea.
you. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So, for anyone who's listening and joining us today, tell us a little bit more about what you do. Before we dive into the grief stuff, let's learn a little bit about more about you.
What I do is collect hobbies and turn them into businesses. To put it as short as I can, it's play. I'm all about play. Everything I do is centered around being creative, playing, and really just embracing that side of our brains that, especially as women, we kind of so often get told to push it down and we need to grow up and be moms and be professional, which I did for a really long time. And I'm back now.
Yep.
And I'm not going back to business and professional. So what I do is create tools to help women. And if it doesn't help, then you have something to play with, because that will help for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your favorite thing that you do?
Um, I love making things, and I also love teaching people how to do the things that I make. So my favorite hobby that I collect and businessify is crochet. I love to crochet. I love to teach crochet, and I really love leading classes, teaching private lessons about crochet. I love seeing the joy that something that I made. That can't be replicated by a machine. I love seeing the joy that it brings whoever is purchasing it. And so I really enjoy going to markets and actually getting to see where my creations are going and just seeing people light up when they look at them.
Oh, I love that. And I have a ton of your crochet stuff. It's amazing. Totally amazing. All right. So, our topic for this podcast is all around grief. So, I want to open it up to you, Lea, and let you share with our audience your story and what you've been through. And if you can touch on how art really has supported you, that would be incredible. So, I'm going to pass it over to you to just share your story.
Perfect. So there's a lot of layers to my story. And that's where a lot of the grief comes from. I think probably the biggest one is that my stepkids, who I've raised since they were 2 and 3, both have FASD, meaning that their mom drank while she was pregnant. And that causes brain damage and some very serious health conditions and behaviors and just things that we need to deal with as caregivers. We've had them full time, my husband and I, their biological dad, and watching them go through the grief of not being able to see their mother anymore, and the trauma of being moved around and misplaced in school programs. And that causes trauma for the caregivers as well. So there was a time I actually made my husband change his ringtone because I was triggered every time the phone rang because it had been a year of the school calling every day by 9:30, and I
Mhm.
actually made him change his ringtone. So that's one layer. Another is that I also have depression. So I have been through serious depression, um, very much related to the trauma related to caregiving, just adding on layers of making things harder and harder and harder, not being able to work because my kids needed so much care when I was very seriously struggling with my depression. And then all of that happened right before COVID. And so I'm just going to say there's definitely a huge layer of trauma that happened raising. I have three kids, two with special needs, and at the time, an 18-month-old through COVID. And I think a lot of us moms who had really young children at that time are starting to realize just how much grief and trauma we went through as moms, just trying to keep it all together through COVID. So when you start layering that on top of, trying to work through all of that and what that looked like at work and how I was treated because I needed to take care of my kids, top priority.
Mhm.
It just adds all these layers of trauma. So that's why it's complex PTSD that I still live with and deal with and face challenges with every day.
That is a lot. And for anyone out there who is a mom or a caregiver to kids that have special needs, that adds an extra layer of parenting right there. Add your depression and all of the stuff that you've been going through. That's a lot. That's a lot. So, wow. So, tell us and the audience how you've used art to support yourself while you've been going through the caregiver grief, the depression, the PTSD, the complex PTSD, and all that is involved in that.
Yeah, I think it actually started very unintentionally.
Mhm.
Um, in my lowest of my depression, when I could not get off the couch, I kind of started crocheting and remembering how much I love to create things. And I was painting with my daughter at the time, and I was like, "This is kind of fun. Maybe I want to paint some more." So I just started painting, and I started working with an art therapist who was able to show me how to look at my art for the subconscious things that I wasn't actively thinking about. Like I was literally painting rainbows and unicorns, and she was finding layers of things that were coming out in my subconscious that I wasn't even aware of. Things like what colors are you using? What does the background look like? What's the symbolism in, why did you choose what you chose, even
Mhm.
in the that you chose, and how does it make you feel when you look at it, those kinds of things. So I was definitely guided by an art therapist, but I think it's something that I've always intuitively done. So I am very reflective and mindful when I'm creating things. I've always done that, and I still continue to do that. I just now do that with a little bit more intention.
So, what was the impact for you then by actually working with the art therapist and diving in a little bit more and being able to have that creative outlet? What did that do for you?
I think it gave me language and it gave me a lens to look at what I was creating, not just as like, oh, I painted a pretty picture and I like how the colors look. It gave me a lens of really, going into the moment, painting whatever I want to paint, and then stepping back later and
Hmm.
actually looking at it, questioning it. Why did I choose these colors? Are there any colors I didn't choose? Um, and then even just Googling symbolism. Like if I'm painting a dragonfly or there's bubbles or feathers or spirals is something that I tended to paint a lot. Things that came out in the subconscious. And one of the really interesting things was to help me grow. She would challenge me with colors that I wasn't using. So we did a full color palette of which colors I like, which colors make me feel uncomfortable. And she challenged me to paint with red because I did not like the color red. And I went and looked and realized I didn't even have any red paint. That's how much I didn't like the color red. But then we were able to, when I did add it into my paintings, it was always the structure. So she was able to point out that red, the reason I was so uncomfortable with it is because I really am a free-flowing artist, and Margaret, you especially know that. That
Yes.
structure is um, it's a love-hate relationship. I know I need it, but I
Hmm.
don't love it. And so it really pushed me and challenged me to help me grow in those
Hmm.
areas by, exploring the things that weren't in my pictures or that made me uncomfortable.
Hmm. So I love that you shared that part because I love the color red. As you can tell, I'm wearing the color red now, and I'm happy that you are a little more comfortable with red because I love red. Um, while you were talking, I was just thinking, like, for women who are going through grief, or anyone actually who might be listening to this who's going through grief, and maybe they're at the really initial stages where they are so overcome, but they want an outlet. They can't really verbalize what it is that they want to do. And maybe the idea of having any structure around creativity is just too out of their ability at that moment. I know when I was going through the loss of my son and my divorce and infertility and that whole story, the idea of actually focusing on something to create something was just far outside of my scope. But I also know from talking with you and other therapists that having that creative outlet, like you had said earlier, gives you that idea of language that you can't put words to. So, how would you, for someone who's in that space where I don't want to put structure, I don't want to put like a specific outcome, how would you encourage them to start, or what would you say?
There's two things. I'd say bring it into what you're already doing. There is opportunity for creativity everywhere, but we tend to think, especially as adults, very narrowly on art. I'm going to paint something. I'm going to draw something. But creativity is so much bigger than that. When you're cooking, there's a layer of creativity. When even if you're organizing a silverware drawer, there's a layer of creativity there. Everyone's going to do it a little bit differently. So start with things that you're already doing and expand your definition of what is creativity. You don't need to sit down to create something that is going to be art that's going to be hung on a wall. Everything is art and creativity. So start with what you're already doing. If all you can manage in a day is getting laundry done, getting one load of laundry done, play with the way you fold your clothes, arrange them by color, whatever feels good in the moment. I think sometimes when we're really deep in grief, we're almost afraid of joy. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's too much of a commitment to say, I want to feel happy. When I was at my absolute lowest, I didn't understand what that meant. I couldn't even wrap my head around the idea of joy, of playfulness. Um, so that's why I say start with what you're already doing. Anything that you're already doing, something small. Um, and then the other thing is like just play. Don't don't put your intentions on the end product. It doesn't need to be something that's going to be hung up. It can absolutely be temporary. You can be out for a walk. I had a friend who used to gather leaves and just arrange them at the end and let them blow away. It doesn't need to be
Wow.
something that you need to keep. It's just in that small moment, one small moment of maybe not even joy, but maybe just not fully grief. Give
Mm-hmm.
yourself that permission to have one small moment and it grows, but start with where you're at. Don't start at the
Mm-hmm.
end point.
No, I love that. I love that. So that would be really great, especially for people who will say, I'm not artistic, I'm not creative, I don't have anything I could do, I'm not a painter. This would be a really great approach for them. It's just finding different ways in their environment to be a little bit more creative, do things a little bit differently. How would you say that actually supports their grief? Like if they're in the throes of grief and they're rearranging the silverware drawer, or they're cooking something, or they're folding laundry differently, how does that impact how they're experiencing their grief?
Yeah, it's totally subconscious and
Okay.
it's happening in a different part of your brain. It's bringing that creative side in because the part of your brain that remembers
Mm-hmm.
before grief, it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And those small things will eventually help your brain to remember those things. And you might start to feel micro moments of joy in the grief and giving yourself permission. For me, it was painting, it was coloring, it was creating things, but it definitely doesn't need to be something that you enjoy doing. Cooking over COVID was one that really helped me because I love cooking, and I started just arranging the chicken nuggets on the plate in fancy, funny ways. And that really helped me get through those moments where I was like, I hate that I have to do all these things, um, like caregiving. So I'm just gonna, like, almost stubbornly give myself one small moment of joy in that, but it's accessing a different part of your brain,
Mhm.
um, without you even trying.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And what I've read and what I've heard from other people, including yourself, is that when you have this creative outlet, it allows you to let your emotions out too, right? Especially and I just literally just did a meditation right before we did this, which was all about finding your voice, especially through grief, because so often we're told to be strong and we're brave and to keep quiet and not share our grief and to keep it all inside, which puts a lot of pressure on us to not express, right? And then we have trouble expressing through language. I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm really resentful, I'm actually relieved that this has happened, or I'm struggling, or I can't hold it together, and if I have to do one more X, Y, and Z, I'm just going to lose it. That through the creative process, that could be a way of expressing your grief. um whether it's angry folding your laundry, or it's vacuuming, or whatever it is that you're doing, or maybe it's cooking while crying, right? Because emotions are fluid and they need movement. And so when you're being creative and you're putting that pen to paper, maybe you decide your creativity is journaling, maybe it's sketching, maybe it's painting, but when you're actually putting movement to it, that helps to let the emotions flow. And so, one of the things I'd like to share with our audience is that when you're being creative and emotions start to come up, let the emotions come, let them flow. They're finding their way out. Maybe it's that you'll just have tears fall without any sound. Maybe it'll be you will find joy in that moment and you'll giggle. Try so hard not to feel guilty for giggling, because you are allowed to feel the joy. And that the creative process will help to sort of dislodge and move things around inside of you. Maybe it's digging in the dirt and gardening. I know a lot of people who love to garden, and gardening can be extremely creative, right? And touching the earth. I love all of what you've shared through that. I have a question for you though. So, say we've got someone who is right in the midst of grief, and I don't know about you, but I know for me, there were times where I just got so angry. I just wanted to smash something, or I wanted to cry. And it was like this overwhelming wave of emotion. So, what would you suggest is one of the most cathartic art activities or creative activities that you would recommend when it feels like it's just too much to handle? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think a couple things that I personally love to do. I love splatter painting. Like I'll just take a
Okay.
canvas
Tell me
outside
about that. Tell me about
and
that.
I'll lay a canvas on the ground and I'll take a paintbrush and I'll just splash paint on it and just choose whatever colors, because the thing about when you're creating, uh, your feelings are coming out subconsciously. You're not saying, I want to talk about this thing that's making me sad. It's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helps you access those things that you might be trying to hold in.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I love splatter painting. Um, I wasn't so much the rage with my hands, but just the tactile of holding something when it, for me, I think it was more about control. Like when everything else was out of control, I couldn't control anything, but I could control my crochet hook and I could
Mm-hmm.
count my stitches and I could find joy in choosing a color or a texture that I liked. So I think it's finding a way that works for you. And the thing about rage is that it's an indicator. For me, it's an indicator of what's bothering you. If you're
Mm-hmm.
angry about something, that's where you need to look. Maybe you're not ready, but notice it.
Mm-hmm.
Write it down. do something while you're thinking about that and see what comes out.
Yeah.
Um, and try and layer in that lens of creativity. Even if you're putting socks in a drawer, arrange them in a certain way. Like, just see what happens because your subconscious will let it out without you even being aware of it.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. I love the idea of splatter painting. It reminded me of Jackson Pollock, right? Just splatter
Exactly.
all over, all over. Um, and I think for a lot of our listeners too, when they're like, anger, anger is an emotion connected to grief that we don't often acknowledge. Usually, when we talk about grief, we talk about how it's the sadness and it's this despair and depression and all the heavy, heavy, heavy emotions. But we don't often talk about the fact that other emotions come up. Anger is a big one. You could be really angry at whatever happened, the person who's passed, or the boss who fired you from your job, wherever your anger comes from, right? And even as a caregiver, you could be angry at the situation that you're in because it isn't the way you thought parenting was going to be,
Mhm.
right? I know a number of people who have children with mental health challenges, emotional health challenges, um, that are just, they get really frustrated and angry and sad because parenting just isn't what they had thought it was going to be. And so, one of the things I want to share with our listeners is that that is completely normal and it is valid to have those emotions. Just allow yourself to feel them so that they don't take over and brim over. And then it's impatience and anger and outbursts. It's really important to acknowledge your emotions. And through creativity, as Leah's shared today, there's so many different outlets you could have for it. I know I was an angry laundry folder for quite some time, like, but it was a movement, it was an expression. I am definitely not a painter. I'm not even a I tried knitting once and my whole scarf that I was making started out this wide and ended up this wide. So that was my foray into knitting. But for anyone who's listening, creativity can be whatever it is that you want it to be. It does not have to be particularly art related. I think we get constrained in those boxes of creativity has to be art. Well, it can be anything. So think about what you enjoy doing before. Think about what you're doing in your everyday life. Like Leah said, cooking, arranging a cutlery drawer, folding laundry, anything that you can add a little bit of a creative flair to, or just something that will allow you to express some of those emotions that you're feeling. So, Leah, before we sign off, what is one simple art based activity that a woman who's listening today could try right now in this moment to begin reconnecting with herself and her grief?
Color. Pick
Color?
up crayons, pencils, whatever you have, color something. And if I might push my own product for a little bit,
Yes,
if
absolutely.
really,
Please.
if you're really feeling stuck and you're like, I really have this creative drive, I want to create something, but you don't have the natural um idea flow that I tap into. I have to like stopper it because it's always there. So what I did was I took that and I put it into a book called Just Play. And this is a guided journal that gives you different prompts within it to easily start creating something and just let go of the idea that it needs to be a masterpiece. Like this one says, make a beautiful garden, no drawing allowed. So you'll have to get creative and use different things, fill this jar with happiness. So just they're designed to be really quick, easy to reference and use what you have. You don't need to buy any special craft supplies to do them. And it can be really cathartic to access that kind of inner child
Mm-hmm.
part, usually for many people pre-grief. But even just that vision of childlike wonder, it's hard to access that again as an adult. So I've designed this to just be really easy to access that.
Mm-hmm. And being able to access that too while we're grieving, even with the intention of trying to access that too, can take our minds off of the grief for just a little bit and allow us the opportunity to channel it into whatever we're creating. And whatever you're creating doesn't have to be happy, happy, joy, joy. It could be all black. right? Maybe what you're feeling is so much heaviness that everything that you draw, everything that you color is black and red and dark green, like all those heavy colors. I know my ex-sister-in-law, she's an artist. And when her dad passed, when we look at her paintings at that time, they were very black, very dark, very red. And as she healed, her painting started to change and more color and lightness came back to them. So it's using, I think it's really important for people to understand that the purpose of being creative is not to create something happy and joyful, it's to reflect how you're feeling. So if you are painting or you are creating and you're using, coloring even, use the colors that reflect how you're feeling, right? And you'll be naturally drawn to those colors, like you said, right? When you did your art therapy stuff, that your art therapist was able to see, well, why'd you use these colors and what did they represent? And so you don't want to do it like all consciously, but just, like Lea said, step back and notice what came up for you and where that took you. So Lea's book, Just Play, I'm going to link it in the show notes below, so you'll be able to access it right away. And thank you for sharing that. And any last final words for our audience, Lea, before we sign off for today?
I think I'll just share my other book that you mentioned
Oh, yes, please do.
well, is if you did want to tap into what I call sacred rage, which is more than just rage. It's connecting so that you know that your rage isn't yours alone. Whatever you're raging about, someone else, I promise you, has raged about it before. So I channeled that into a witchy coloring book. So every page has a really, I'll just show you one that I've colored, a really feminine, sacred rage. And beside it, it has a spell with a sweary affirmation. So I tend to use that as a bit of a reflection after I finish coloring. I read through the spell and the words, and it really helps to just release some of that anger, or just see where it is. If you read someone else's rage and you're like, yeah, me too, start there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, Lea, for joining us today. I love what you do. And thank you for sharing your own journey as well. I think it's really important that people understand that they're not alone in their grief journeys and that we all go through things. It's all our own unique experiences, but we can find people who can understand and at least relate to the things that we're going through. So thank you so much for being here today. I will include all of Lea's contact information, how you can connect with her online, links to her product. The two books that she showed will be in the show notes. So help yourself. They are amazing. I have both. They're awesome. And I will rage color on a regular basis when I'm feeling frustrated. I love it. So thank you all for joining us for today. I appreciate your time. Feel free to share this episode with anyone whom you think would benefit from listening. And if you have any questions or any topics that you'd like to have covered in the future, please drop me a comment below and be sure to put that together for you. And so until next time on Grief, the Emotional Shitstorm You Never Signed Up For, we'll see you again. Thanks for joining us today.